What up, Giants fans? NFL free agency is about 2 weeks away, and the Giants could have as much as $70 million in cap space. In today's show, we're going to go through my perfect free agency plan for Big Blue. But first, I want to get all the real ones involved in the comments section. I want you to name a free agent you want the Giants to sign, whether it be a receiver, a corner, a lineman, a linebacker, or maybe even a safety or a running back. Let me know. One player you want the Giants to sign in NFL free agency. Welcome into New York Giants Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Marshall Green. On today's show, we're going to outline the perfect free agency for Big Blue, because free agency is set to open up on March 13th, March 13th, and the Giants are going to have roughly about $46.8 million in cap space. And I think there's some moves that the Giants could make to even get that number up some right now. Right here, March 13th to start, $46.8 million in cap space. And the Giants need to get better at the wide receiver, interior offensive line, linebacker, and quarterback spot. But $46 million with you having to re-sign Jones and having to re-sign Saquon Barkley really isn't all that much money. And then you still got to put aside $5 to $8 million for your draft class. And then you want to have $5 to $7 million in wiggle room during the regular season. So the Giants don't just have $47 million to sign on free agents. They'd actually have to use that smartly the rest of the season. I do think there are some ways the Giants could create more cap space, and it revolves around the four players that you now see on screen. That includes Leonard Williams, that includes Kenny Golladay, Darnay Holmes, and it also includes Shane Lemieux. There's been some rumors that Leonard Williams might have to take a cap hit and kind of take a restructure, and the Giants could kind of figure a way to lower his cap hit of $32.2 million in two different ways. They could restructure his deal, which would free up about $8.14 million in cap space, or extend Leonard Williams' contract, adding a couple years onto it, and they could free almost $13.4 million in cap space. So they could save some money even if they don't cut him. I believe they will cut Kenny Golladay. That will save them $6.7 million. I think Darnay Holmes is a guy that they could look to cut. That saves $2.7 million. And Shane Lemieux is all but gone as well. Been dealing with that foot injury the past couple of years, and the Giants can save $1 million if they move on, and I expect that to happen. So if you cut Lemieux, Holmes, Golladay, and you restructure Leonard Williams in the two ways that we pointed out, the Giants could have almost $70 million in cap space, and that's a number that you can do much more damage with. Like when you re-sign, or if you re-sign Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, you'd still have plenty of money to, bolster the rest of this roster and really get some talent in there. Order number one of Marsh as the general manager of the Giants, you got to find a way to re-sign Daniel Jones, and you have to find a way to bring back Saquon Barkley. And there's a couple different ways that you can go about that. You have the franchise tag. Do you want to use it on Daniel Jones and then get a long-term deal for Saquon Barkley? But I think it's most important to know that Daniel Jones is not getting $45 million per year on his next contract. There were rumors that came out that he asked for $45 million, and there was more rumors came out that said that was never true. So somewhere our wires got crossed, and one of those stories was not true. And I tend to believe that Daniel Jones never asked for $45 million per year. I believe CAA, his old agency, the one he left to go to Athletes First, was upset that he left, and they put out that report or rumor to the media to get everybody kind of shaken up a little bit. I can almost guarantee, though, he is not getting $45 million. So if he's not getting $45 million, how much could he get? Well, when you look at the highest paid quarterbacks in the National Football League, 1 to 10 per year, I think this kind of outlines the picture a little bit. I don't think he's getting $50 million like Rodgers. I don't think he's getting $45 million like Patrick Mahomes. And I don't think he's going to get $40 million like Matt Stafford or Dak Prescott. But where you see Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff at $35 million and $33.5 million is where I think he fits best, especially with the franchise tag for quarterbacks sitting at $32 million. So if I was Joe Schoen, this would be the contract that I would offer Daniel Jones. It would be a 3-year deal worth $100.5 million, an average annual value of $33.5 million, and $67 million guaranteed. which pretty much means the first 2 years of his contract are guaranteed, and then you have an easy out after year 3. And I'd also like to add a void year or 2 at the end, which pretty much means you're taking money from year 1 and adding it to year 4 and 5, so the cap hit for year 1 becomes lower. It's really just an accounting trick. That's the contract that I would offer Daniel Jones. I think that is perfectly fair, and I think that the void years would lower the cap hit in year 1. You're giving him a 2-year fully guaranteed deal. If you don't like it after 2 years, you can easily move on with no dead cap hit. If it works out, you give him that 3rd year, then he gets a contract extension, then the void years are pretty much null and void. So I would bring back Jones on that deal, and then they would go to Saquon Barkley, and I would either franchise tag him or try to get a long-term deal done. But I think the franchise tag becomes available and more into play for Barkley once you get that long-term deal for Daniel Jones done. You want to tag Barkley to keep him out of free agency and keep him, really withhold the power for him to negotiate in free agency and see what other teams want. If you franchise tag him, that gives you a longer timeline to extend his contract and hopefully get a long-term deal done. When you look at what the highest running backs are paid, it makes some sense why Saquon Barkley would say he wants $14 million. Reportedly turned down a deal during the NFL bye week for the Giants of $12 million, and I think 13.5 would get it done. But I do have a little bit of buyer's remorse because, look, the Alvin Kamara contract didn't work. The Zeke contract didn't work. There were a lot of other running back contracts on that list we just showed you that haven't worked out. Paying a running back a second contract with guaranteed money is always risky, but I do think that Saquon Barkley is worth it. I would like to keep him 4 years, $50 million, 3 years, around that range, about $12.5, $13 million per year. That's what I think could get it done. Obviously, Barkley's going to want more, but he did say he wants to retire a Giant. He doesn't want to reset the running back market. So those are 2 contracts that you definitely have to think out for the long term. I gave you 2 numbers that I think make some sense. So I want to hear from you right now. How much will Jones and Barkley get paid? Answer them one by one. Let me know how much you think Daniel Jones is going to get paid, and then let me know how much you think Saquon Barkley is going to get paid. I want to hear from you down in the comment section. We'll get to the rest of my perfect free agency plan coming up in a second, but first, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Fume. Go to tryfume.com/chatsports and use code chatsports to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. We all have bad habits, and we certainly know how hard they can be to kick those bad habits. Our sponsor, Fume, is on a mission to accelerate humanity's breakup from the bad habits that consume far too many of us. Fume is a natural diffusive device that uses plants and behavioral science to help you trade out your negative habit for a positive one. I didn't expect much out of Fume when I got it, but the minty sensation is really awesome. I do want to be clear. Fume is not a vape. It's a non-electronic device designed to transform your negative habits. The easiest way to stop a bad habit is to switch to a positive one, and Fume is designed perfectly to do just that. Head to tryfume.com/chatsports and use code chatsports to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com/chatsports. Use code chatsports. The link is at the bottom of the screen. It's also in the comments and description. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors: crisp mint, maple pepper, and white cranberry. I love the crisp mint. Just the minty sensation is awesome. You're going to love it too. Get hooked up with Fume. That link is in the comments and description of today's show. The first order of business has to be re-sign Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. But the next one for me is you have to sign a wide receiver. You have to get better on the outside. You have to add more playmakers to this offense. Because if you're going to bring back Daniel Jones, you have to get better at spots and create more explosive plays. The Giants were one of the least explosive offenses in the passing game last year, and that's why it was so hard for them to score a lot of points. You got to get better at that spot. And the first name a lot of people talk about is Odell Beckham Jr. There was a report that came out over the weekend from Connor Hughes of SNY, covers the Giants and the Jets. He reported that the Giants will pursue Odell Beckham Jr. in free agency. And before I tell you what I think about OBJ, I just want to get this in the comment section. I want to ask you guys, because I feel a little bit conflicted right now. Should the Giants sign OBJ? Type OBJ for yes, no BJ for no. I want to hear from you because no, I'm good. I pass on Odell Beckham Jr. I thought it made sense during the season. The Giants needed that immediate upgrade. But just think about what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll tell you. They want smart, tough, and dependable players. Is that OBJ? Is he dependable from a performance spot? Yes, but he's always hurt. Is he smart? I think so. And is he tough? I do think so. But the best ability is availability. I don't think the Giants want to pay a guy that's already torn his ACL a couple of times big money. So you look at the rest of the wide receiver free agency class. Guys like Juju Smith-Schuster. Guys like Jacoby Myers. Maybe Michael Thomas once he gets cut by the Saints. Maybe DJ Chark or Mecole Hardman or Allen Lazard. Paris Campbell, Julio Jones, or Jarvis Landry. I do know this. I'm not interested in Landry. I'm not interested in Jones. Not really all that interested in Lazard. I like DJ Chark, but he's a little bit too injury prone for me. I have a little bit of interest in Michael Thomas, but I'm kind of shied away by what's happened the last couple of years. I like Jacoby Myers, but I don't want to pay him $20 million. And I think Juju Smith-Schuster is staying with the Chiefs. So the guy that I think makes the most sense for Big Blue from these 10 guys is Mecole Hardman, former wide receiver for the Chiefs. Played in an offense where Mike Kafka was the quarterback coach, so there's some ties there. There's some familiarity there. And when Joe Schoen took this job as the general manager, he said he wants to pay people that he knows. And that's all they did last year. They signed players from the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. And here's another player from the Chiefs that Kafka knows all and well about. And I think if he stood up for him and told Joe Schoen we could use a speedster like Mecole Hardman, kind of a gadget guy, a guy that could stretch the field vertically and horizontally and add more spark to this offense, I think Joe Schoen would be very interested in. Another wide receiver I could talk myself into is Paris Campbell from the Indianapolis Colts. A little bit smaller of a receiver, but I like the speed and the verticality that he brings to the game. I like that he can stretch the field on the outside. I also love that he can catch the ball and make some moves and be kind of a yak guy in that aspect. I wouldn't pay either of those guys big money. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this wide receiver class in totality. I like OBJ. I have concerns about him. I like Mecole Hardman, but I'm not paying him $15, $20 million. I like Paris Campbell, but I'm not paying him more than $10, $11, $12 million. I think what the Giants need to do is sign a receiver and then draft one with one of their premium draft picks coming up in the draft. We showed you 10 guys at wide receiver. If I had to pick one, I would go Mecole Hardman just because of the familiarity that the Giants and Mike Kafka have with him and just the big playability that he brings. Giants need one of those guys. So I want you to name a wide receiver you want the Giants to sign in NFL free agency. Let me know down below. After you re-sign Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and you sign a wide receiver, you have to get better at the interior offensive line. Because the Giants, they drafted interior offensive line with premium draft picks this past year. Joshua Zudu and Marcus McKeithen both had knee injuries at North Carolina in the third and I think either fourth or fifth round last year. So maybe you don't need to go out and spend the big bucks at an interior offensive line guy, but I'd like to sign a center. And the center that I would look at in free agency is Ethan Pocic of the Cleveland Browns. These are the top 5 interior offensive linemen going into free agency. I like all these guys. Powers, Sayamalu, Pocic, Reisner, as well as Bradley Bozeman. But I think Powers might be too much for me as well as Sayamalu, but I do like Pocic, and I think the Giants have to get better at the center spot. When you have a good offensive line, it starts from the middle and branches way out, and Pocic could be an elite offensive lineman. I think John Feliciano is a free agent, or I know he is, and I think the Giants might bring him back, but they don't want to overpay him. Nick Gates is also a free agent. I could see them bringing him back, but I think they're going to cut Shane Lemieux. I think Jack Anderson could be cut. They like Wyatt Davis. They've claimed him now twice to their practice squad. So you have some young bodies at the guard spot, but you got to get just more talent at center. I think Ethan Pocic could be a guy that could be a starting center and one that's not too expensive for Big Blue. Another really thing I want the Giants to do is to not overpay an inside linebacker. We've talked about how the Giants have to get better at that spot, and there's some big guys out there, like a Levante David, or like a TJ Edwards, or Tremaine Edmonds, or Jermaine Pratt, or David Long, or Leighton Vander Esch. But I don't want to pay a lot of money for a free agent linebacker because I even believe linebackers are like running backs. You get the most production in the early part of their years, and they're most valuable when they're cost controlled and you can get them out of the NFL draft. Like, I don't want to pay too much for Bobby Urquidy, who's going to get a lot of money from the Colts, or David Long, or Leighton Vander Esch. Some linebackers that I could look at in NFL free agency, or guys that you could take a flyer on, maybe like Deion Jones, formerly of the Falcons, played for the Browns last year. I also like Devin Bush for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Had that knee injury a couple years ago, but I still think he has some juice left to go in the tank. If I had to sign one of the high-priced guys, I'd like it to be Tremaine Edmonds, but I do think that the Giants might not be in the price range that he's looking for. I would rather spend big money at the cornerback spot, in my opinion, than the linebacker spot. I think you can get a linebacker in the draft in the first 3 rounds that can be an immediate producer. Well, I think at the cornerback spot, it's harder to get one of those guys. And if you can get a guy that can play right away in free agency, it bodes well for just the financials and the team building strategy of this team. I'd rather pay a corner than a linebacker. So let's look at the top 10 guys. I don't think James Bradberry would come back. I think there's some beef there between him and the new regime. I like Jamel Dean. I also like Patrick Peterson and Cameron Sutton, but I think they could be out of the Giants' price range. Jonathan Jones, I think he's a good player, but anytime you sign a corner from New England, it's somewhat scary. Wonder if they're kind of just a product of the system or they're actually really good players. Marcus Peters is someone I think the Giants are going to look at due to his ties to Wink Martindale and Baltimore. I would say Peters is a guy the Giants are going to look at. I like Emmanuel Mosley as well. Didn't play last year because he was hurt. I also like Sean Bunting as well as Rocky Sin. If I had to choose one of these guys, it would probably be Peters just because the familiarity and just the veteran, and I know that he's already going to fit into this scheme. I do want to ask this question before we kind of round out what we talked about on today's show. Pick a position to pay. Would you rather pay a linebacker in free agency or would you rather pay a cornerback in free agency? The Giants only have so many salary cap dollars to go around. So let me know, what position would you rather pay in free agency? Type CB for corner or LB for linebacker. So when I take a look at the Giants potentially having $70 million in cap space, and you add up the 10.3 from Mecole Hardman, all these projections are down below. These come from Spotrac. Spotrac is an awesome salary cap tool that I use all the time, and they have projected what these players will sign for. $10.3 million per year from Hardman, $7.2 million per year from Ethan Pocic, $9.8 million per year from Marcus Peters, and $3.0 from Devin Bush. I think this would be a home run free agency class for the Giants. You don't overspend at any spot. You don't sign really any old players. I know Peters is 30, but he's a vet, and you can use that at the cornerback spot. And I think you get a lot of talent for the holes that you have, and you get to maintain flexibility going forward. So I bring in these 4 guys in a perfect free agency plan, but I want to hear from you, though. Get out your red pen and yell at me in the comment section. I want you to grade my free agency plan down below. You bring back Barkley, you bring back Jones, and you sign the 4 guys we just talked about. Grade my plan for me down below, A, B, C, D, or F. I appreciate everybody for tuning into today's show. Longer video, but I wanted to talk about a lot as NFL free agency is coming within a couple of weeks. It'll be here before you know it. We'll keep you up to date with every single signing the Giants make. Give me a follow on Twitter also, another way to stay up to date, @MarshallGreen_.